10 hours. 22 locations. Probably 100 miles. It's episode 300, everyone. I'm so excited about this.
1. Kirkstall Road and...
Oh, where have we been?
1. Kirkstall Road and, because I forgot to film this bit, 2. Kirkstall. 3. Cookridge. 4. Yeadon. 5. Sheepscar. 6. Chapel Allerton. 7. More Allerton. 8. Alwoodley. 9. Oakwood. 10. Whinmoor. 11. Crossgates. 12. Thorpe Park. 13. Kippax. 14. Hunslet. 15. Woodlesford. 16. Outwood. 17. Holbeck. 18. Cherwell. 19. Morley. 20. New Wortley. 21. Bramley. And 22. Pudsey.
We're in Leeds! Yes, folks, we're in Leeds. Oh, I'm so excited. Let's do this thing.
It used to be a joke, really. Leeds leads the way, people said, when things went wrong. When the roads got blocked, the buses broke down, whenever the city's great organisation machinery ground to a halt. It's easy to see where the irony came from, I suppose. It's not exactly the most inspiring of places at first glance. But nobody's laughing now, because for once, it looks as though the old saying is true. It looks as though Leeds really does lead the way. This is a city that's taken the Buchanan report to heart. A city with the same problems as every major city in this country. Like the rest, it's out of date. It was built to meet the needs of a different age. Like the rest, it needs to renew great sections of its urban areas, which are crumbling to pieces. And like the rest, it must somehow learn to live with the motor car. But what makes Leeds unusual is that instead of having a whole series of individual plans for individual problems, they brought them all together. The lot. Public transport, environment, new roads, the whole works integrated into one central policy. A policy that makes the planners feel they may have hit upon the answer. New roads, new parking facilities, improved public transport, and a much stricter control on the volume of traffic. Basically, that's it. The crux of the problem as Leeds sees it. You see, the cold fact is that if nothing were done, Leeds, like every other city in Britain, will be choked to a standstill by the turn of the century.
And yet that is exactly what happened. New motorways were built, carving up the centre of Leeds city centre. The cars flooded in. No punitive action was taken to limit that flow rate. And crucially, no public transport was built other than a few stations here and there and maybe the improvement to the odd bus stop. Actually building public transport that would have provided a viable alternative to the floods of vehicles entering Leeds city centre simply was not created. It never came to be, and the result is a Leeds that just does not work. And this was supposed to be the solution. The 2040 vision of mass transit. We covered it in RailNatter. We went through it. It went through a series of corridors. In fact, let's pull it to one side. It had a series. Hello, everyone. This is a live one. Yeah, it's just got lots of pre-recorded bits. We've got production values tonight. And I am doing full ADHD mode. No, it had a series of corridors. And it went through each, explaining things like mode, what mode share there is, levels of deprivation. That document was really good. The 2040 vision was really good. And then more recently, a couple of years ago, we saw the focusing in on the phase 1 proposals, which just looked at 2 corridors, Leeds to Bradford and Leeds southwards just to the White Rose Centre. Frankly, confusing initial proposal because, well, on a number of levels, it tied it. There is an existing good corridor between Bradford and Leeds, in terms of the existing railway, and likewise to the White Rose Centre. This was an interesting choice, and I trusted the consultation. That was what people wanted to do and what the city wants to do, because it's up to the city to do that. Here's Leeds. And what I've been doing, what I did, in fact, was have a day of going around and going along each of the corridors to understand what transport actually looks like. And so first of all, I started with the kind of the three corridors bundled into one, confusingly, the 2040 vision. I think its weakest element. So I split this into three. So the North Leeds Airport corridor, the North Leeds Alwoodley corridor. Also, everyone who's from Leeds, you can laugh at me when I pronounce things strangely. The North Leeds Whinmoor corridor. Then we've got the East Leeds corridor, and you'll see all the different locations we've picked here. You've got the Wakefield and Five Towns corridor, of which I picked a few places. The South Leeds Dewsbury corridor, where I picked up Holbeck, Cherwell and Morley. And then Bradford to Leeds, where I looked at New Wortley, Bramley and Pudsey. We're not looking at Bradford, we're not looking at Huddersfield, we're not looking at... we're kind of sticking to the Leeds city area and the kind of the fringe of it for now. That's the focus of this episode. So there gives us our sort of, overlaid onto Leeds. This is where I was exploring. So a broad exploration of what Leeds has, what Leeds is, what its challenges are. And I'm just going to kind of taking those dots that I've pinned everywhere and putting them onto the bus map, because Leeds has fairly recently has developed a unified bus map. This is, firstly, it's good, it's pretty clear. Equally, it also, by the way, has corridors which are slightly different to the ones in the mass transit plan. Some there are similarities, some there are differences, but broadly, some of those bus corridors kind of map onto some of those mass transit proposed the 2040 vision corridors as well. So, no Tom Forth Leeds stuff getting mentioned this time, Detour. But Tom has done lots of data stuff that we can dive into the deep dive of. This was me exploring Leeds so that I could PROCIV a whole bunch of it. More on that shortly. So this is the bus map. The trouble is, the bus map ignores the fact that, and indeed lots of conversations about mass transit and about public transport in Leeds often forget that Leeds does have, in bits of its city, not the whole city, a pretty expansive suburban rail network, particularly going out towards Skipton, Ilkley, and round the top into Bradford. You have an electric suburban rail network that's actually remarkably good. This is the hourly service map done by Transit Diagrams a few years back, so it's not exactly perfect, but this is the 2022 version of truth from Leeds in the middle there, and all the trains going out in all directions. This is really nice. This gives us an idea of the sort of the suburban network and the density of services that you get out towards, the service is not so good southwards, as you can see, like Castleford, Nottingley, it's pathetic hourly service. If you see an hourly service in a city, that's not useless. But you can see the density of services out to Skipton. That's 5 trains an hour, including the long distance service, admittedly, which is very silly. But there are, fairly decent. You've got quarterly hour, 15-minute services on the line through places like Bingley and Keighley. Shipley, for example, has a really decent service. If you're in Shipley, Kirkstall Forge, Napoli Bridge, lots of trains, no stops. And Kirkstall Forge is also the first station out of the city centre in that direction. So it's an outer suburban system rather than an inner suburban system very much. And the rail network has all sorts of shortcomings, and that's a future episode. For now, though, I want to talk about why we're here, which is, of course, the PROCIV system. A quick reminder that the PROCIV system is our science, our patented science-based system for assessing mobility for a given community outside of the very urban, the very centre of the urban core. So the first is permeability. P is permeability, which is the ease of which humans can move around within that area. The second is R for radial connections, radial links. O is for orbital links. C is for national connectivity regionally and nationally. I is for integrated transport, the extent to which transport is successfully integrated. And V is for violence, and specifically the score is the extent to which that community has escaped transport violence inflicted on it by mostly motorways, but things like airports as well. This is, of course, patented true, beautiful rail nature style. So PROCIV, we're going to be going through and scoring everything. And we're going to go through each of the corridors in turn We're going to start with the North Leeds airport corridor. We're going to start, and you know, each of these areas, each of our different kind of pins and blobs that we kind of go through, had an exploration. We'll go through each, and I have varying thoughts as I was wandering around each of these places, getting a feel for what they're like, because you can't PROCIV without being somewhere and wandering around in it. So let's get stuck in, shall we?
We start our adventures fairly close to the heart of Leeds, in Kirkstall Road. Actually, I've stepped off the back of Kirkstall Road. I want to talk about the scale of development going on in central Leeds right now. It's enormous. A huge amount of development, quite a lot of it predicated on the arrival of HS2, whoops. But also, this is not good, because this is happening without any plan for transportation in the city. None at all. I'm sorry, 20 years away from the next tram a tram, no less, just a tram, which is just a fancy bus appearing, is just not good enough. So it's quite interesting to sort of observe, and for people who aren't aware, many of you watching might not be aware of the scale of development happening in the centre of Leeds right now. You might be more familiar with it happening in Manchester, but it is happening in Leeds as well, without any plan to move the people around that might be going, you know, living in or working in these huge buildings. So this is Kirkstall Road itself. It is a busy corridor in and out of a sizable chunk of the city. And you can see it's a big wide corridor too. Yes, it gets a bit narrower further towards Kirkstall, but that's the direction of the city, by the way. You can see the candlestick in the Whitney building over there. This is a big wide corridor that you can do quite a lot with. It does beg the question why you aren't also, look at the width, look at when we talk about permeability. This is what I mean when I'm thinking about permeability and how difficult it is as a human being to get around in a city when this sort of stuff is in the way. And I'm going to be honest with you, Central Leeds is even worse for that. Central Leeds is hopeless for permeability. But city centres don't really get rated on the PROCIV system, do they? So you've got all these businesses. There's Emmerdale is over there. They film Emmerdale, or where they haven't built the fake village. That's all the internal scenes are done over there. ITV have their HQ over there. There's all sorts going on here, but absolutely prime for a light rail connection. You know, not that exists. A tram connection in and out of the city along this corridor, and then working its way upwards. You can hear the traffic noise. This is not good. This is not a key corridor in and out of the city, and you can just, let's just say this, it's going to give you a flavour of what is to come.
So, this is a views, and we're going to do this. This is kind of going to be the way that we're going to do tonight. Each of our 22 locations, we're going to have me doing some chat, and then we'll have a look at what it looks like from the air. So here is the corridor going up. You can see, in fact, I've got my Wacom. You can see, I was down here. You can see that all this is nothing here, and in the video, it's already got huge towers building up everywhere. You can see the width of the corridor here that could be, you know, doing much more. This is kind of this is one area. Oh, I should say, like, it's all retail parks and industrial, but that's not an excuse. Like, people still need to move around those things. We're not quite in AI mega bubble future yet, where it's just AI doing AI stuff, and we're all kind of Soylent Greenified. You know, it's hopeless. There's this huge wide corridor. You know, saved for a larger urban motorway, and thankfully not used for that. But I would describe this. You know, it is worth highlighting that the frequency buses is pretty good here, and there is, for the most part, fixed bus infrastructure. There are bus lanes, but it's not enough. Where are we off to next? Yes. We work our way out from Kirkstall to from Kirkstall Road out to Kirkstall. So there's where we were, Kirkstall Road. Now we're in Kirkstall proper. Kirkstall is one of the studentier areas. It's also got a bit more in the way of paths crisscrossing around that aren't just roads. Like, Leeds has a chronic lack of nice greenways. So there's a little bit of an improvement here, but you can still see down by the river here, ex-mill areas. Leeds, money made by mining, mills, and, well, money is how Leeds was, you know, grew as a city and expanded so much. You can just see that roads. So we're not out of the woods yet when it comes to Kirkstall. Let's see what I have to say about that.
Now, Kirkstall Road might have shown us what violence looks like in an urban context, and with that sort of, you know, the wide roads close to the city centre, which Leeds is unfortunately defined by. But the trouble is that continues further out. Kirkstall is arguably an area that is really pretty good in terms of permeability, in terms of its connections in and out of the city, being on the same corridor. Well, that's Kirkstall Road over there. You know, I'm looking at it, or becomes Kirkstall Road. But look at this sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 lanes, gyratory thing over there, and then another roundabout over there, and this just continues. And this is a theme. You're going to find this is a theme throughout the whole episode of just unending volumes of just big chunky roads for no good reason, because the logic has been we have to prioritise the flow of personal vehicles over and above the ability of humans to move around in the city, and the consequence is grim, to be honest. This is noisy, it's polluted, it's extremely frustrating when, as I said, Kirkstall is one of the better parts of the city in terms of its connectivity, you know, radially, if not orbitally, and you know, the permeability. This is one of the kind of the close to being one of the thriving student areas, Headingley up the road as well, and yet it's just opportunities lost, opportunities missed. Yeah, let's see what's next. I find myself in Horsforth Station, not because we're talking about Horsforth, we're actually talking about Cookridge, which is that way and up the hill a bit. Horsforth Station, though, is kind of sees a pretty decent, like, semi-urban service, like not decent from a sort of a inner London perspective, but you know, you get trains every 20 minutes, which is pretty decent. And as a result of that, the station is popular. Like, it's a popular station, it gets well used. The other thing that's interesting is the level of permeability. It's an interesting one, a chance for us to talk about urban design in terms of the shape of the urban fabric, the roads, the actual, how easy it is to actually pass through an urban area. That's what we're going to be talking about when we talk about Cookridge. But also, of course, the relationship between this line, that way to York, that way to Leeds, this line, and the connections up towards the airport, and sort of the usefulness of this corridor and potential variations of it as part of the bigger picture.
So, what am I talking about when I talk about urban permeability? Well, there are different ways to design urban fabric when you're building new houses. Cookridge here, you see Cookridge is mostly, this is Cookridge, has been designed actually in quite a good way, in that it doesn't have stupid, squiggly, like 80s, 90s, 2000s era house building. It actually has road structures that mostly follow natural ley lines, natural lines of sight, natural pathways of walking. And where you build roads like that, whilst the traffic roads, the tarmacked trafficy roads might not do that, walking routes should always be designed to be the fastest route from where you are to where you need to be, whether it's the town centre, the railway station, the bus stop, whatever it happens to be. And Cookridge is not too bad on that front. Other parts of Leeds are much worse, particularly some of the newer areas of Leeds, newer residential areas of Leeds are absolutely hopeless for it. Yeah, natural desire lines, exactly, Raphael Nicholas, exactly. So let's have a look. What's next?
Well, this looks nice, doesn't it? This is Yeadon Tarn, and it's all very pleasant. Look up the time that Yeadon Tarn was painted on the top of the Avro building that's over that way, because that weird flat horizon line over there is Leeds Bradford Airport, the stupid airport that needs to close. See previous episodes. We talked a lot about violence from roads, or we will be talking a lot about violence from roads in this episode, and we did about in the Gorton and Denton episode. Well, what about violence from airports? And there's, you know, in terms of the Leeds, wider Leeds area, West Yorkshire, a few places better represent that than if you live in Cookridge, Yeadon, and generally in the proximity of the airport, because you get a lot of noise. Actually, weirdly enough, this is a quiet time. It's much quieter than usual time period. There aren't any flights until 4 o'clock, but most of the time you've got flights throughout the day coming over loudly, landing behind us, and inflicting their misery on yet another classic. I mean, just the interesting thing about today's journey, as you'll see as we go through more of these, is the familiar kind of stone mining villages and towns and communities built up around mineral wealth that has disappeared or got too expensive to pursue, which is a good thing, by the way. But then, no replicating economic activity to to do anything other than turn these places into satellite towns, rip out their soul. Which is, and then of course, not helped by decisions made to prioritise the way that you get people from those satellite towns into the centre, being by road. And we've seen that already coming up this corridor from central Leeds. I'm afraid we're going to see it as a constant theme throughout.
And so there we go, Yeadon here. This is big Yeadon. And here's some of the airport, the kind of the terminal buildings and car parks and everything that direction. And this gives us an example of worse urban design, actually, because you start seeing this. I mean, it's not so bad in that it's still straight-ish edges, but you start getting these weavy bits and these sort of curvy roads that are, it starts being like, no, straight. I get someone's bringing up police safe by design. Secure by design. Yes, secure by design should just be shredded as a concept, because it results in the urban environment being actively designed to be horrible for people moving around. It's a classic case of, but one guy on a moped every 2 years might make a noise and reduce our house prices, so we have to make sure that we barricade everyone in behind high fences and horrible urban design that looks nice if you've got a series of French circles, but actually if you want to get from A to B, it's hopeless. So there you go. The thing with all these, most of these images that I'm going to be putting up, by the way, is you can see the line of sight down to the city centre, which I think is kind of interesting. So most of these images that I've got, admittedly they're half the screen rather than the full screen, but I can do the full screen ones, share those at some point if people are interested. You get to see down into the city centre and sort of see the corridor you're talking about. So, for example, to get over to like Cookridge and Horsforth is over the other side over here. So going underneath here in a sort of a tunnel is what you'd have to get transport through. So that's kind of where you end up structure-wise. But what we need to do now is, of course, PROCIV these. We need to get the PROCIV scores up. And I'm just going to blast through. Like these, I'm not going to animate them, I'm just going to blast through. So we start with Kirkstall Road, which gets a score of 13, right? So it's, given that we've got 22 of these, I thought, let's not faff around. Population of 0, ? Permeability is extremely poor, so it gets a score of 1. Its radial connectivity, it has bus infrastructure, and it has a very high frequency of buses. So actually its radial connectivity is I would describe it as good. And that is the definition. If it's good, then it's making it in. However, I would describe the orbital connectivity from Kirkstall Road to be poor. It's not completely non-existent, but it's poor. Now, this will become an emerging theme, which is national connectivity. Now, you might think that given Kirkstall Road is right next to the city centre, to the railway station, it would be getting a higher score. This is the fun bit that I want to point out to everyone, which is Leeds doesn't have an intercity connection to the rest of the country by any sensible measure. It does not have a 125 mile an hour railway connection, 200 kilometre an hour connection to the rest of the country. The line, Dol 1, the line going from Leeds down to Doncaster, is a 100 mile an hour railway. That's pathetic. You have 125 mile an hour trains that basically cruise on their way up. In a way, it's good that they are, because that is an extremely mixed traffic section of railway. So any faster and you'd hit services even harder. But there is not a high-speed intercity connection into Leeds station. So I'm afraid it has to be walloped hard on the connectivity point. Also, the fact that connectivity on the cross-country route and across the Pennines and northwards is basically woeful from an interconnectivity perspective for Leeds. Like, Leeds really has poor transport, not just urban, but nationally. It has extremely poor connectivity. That's before we talk about links down to Sheffield and beyond as well. Just, hopeless. Then when it comes to integration, this is going to be a consistent score throughout, which is the extent to which transport is integrated. Look, it's essentially because everywhere we've gone, we're part of it's on the bus network. Basically everywhere, almost everywhere I think we are, has a 15 minutes or better bus connection. I think Outwood might be an exception to that. We'll get there later. And the bus, we'll talk a bit more about transport integration later. There's a lot more to be done, but there is some level of cross-integration within the buses, if not to modes beyond, which means it can't be very poor. I would describe it as consistently poor in terms of that integration, because transport integration isn't just about one mode. And then the last one here, violence varies in various places, but I would not describe Kirkstall Road as being very poor, because a lot of the damage is that actually this is a heavily industrialised area, and it escapes some of the worst harms that we see in other places. But I would still say it's not great given the scale of industrial dereliction and so on. It's transport has placed a heavy hand upon that part of Inner Leeds, as with so many others. Lots of gyratories and all sorts of nonsense. Anyway, so Kirkstall Road. What about, we're going to kind of cluster these, by the way, by route. So that was Kirkstall Road. What about Kirkstall itself? Well, what's interesting is you can see that whilst it has improvements in, basically similar, other than we've got a bit further out, frequencies reduced, and there's not dedicated bus infrastructure, so the quality of radial connectivity is reduced. Actually, bus frequencies might be as high, but the bus infrastructure has disappeared, so that score is reduced. But the permeability in Kirkstall is better. Like, it's easier to get around Kirkstall on foot. It's not quite as unpleasant. So you can see there's a bit of improvement, and the violence score has increased because Kirkstall is much. I'd say it's okay. It hasn't had huge amounts of huge guttings from major roads being barreled through it, even if more can be done. So Kirkstall in a better place. Then we get to Cookridge. Cookridge here. We see that Cookridge starts having better. Actually, Cookridge benefits from some better orbital connectivity. Both with bus and sort of the ability to kind of just humans to move kind of across. So there are some better bus routes to get orbitally around. Permeability is better in Cookridge as well than as you got further out. Otherwise, little change. So the score goes up from 13 for Kirkstall to 15. And Yeadon, we end with Yeadon. Yeadon it just suffers. It's further from the city, so it doesn't have quite as good bus connectivity. Permeability in Yeadon is lots of busy roads, very like nothing. And this is a theme for Leeds. Like, there are some points of light in terms of cycling infrastructure, but they're in the large clumps of suburb. There are just There's a woeful lack of cycling infrastructure. So permeability really not great, and across the board, just you've not got good. You've got poor radial, poor orbital connectivity. The national and regional connectivity is very poor. Integration is the same throughout. And then Yeadon, it's not as bad as some of what we're going to see, but it's poor given its proximity to the airport. I should say Cookridge is not perfect, despite having not really witnessed any major violence, but it's knocked down to an okay score because of the fact that it, again, has lots of flights going over the top. So next, we go to the North Leeds Alwoodley kind of corridor. Let's see what the kind of goes straight up the middle. Let's see what there is to learn going up this direction. And we start kind of only a couple hundred paces out the centre of Leeds, having escaped its horrible motorway things, which, by the way, we will talk about in future episodes. We'll talk about Central Leeds and the horror show that is Central Leeds. We're focusing on outside of that core for now. So let's see what Mee has to say.
This is Sheepscar, and once upon a time, it was an actual place. Now, it is road. It's just tarmac going in all directions. Whatever was left of this place has been completely disintegrated into nothing as the roads go off up towards Chapel Allerton. In that direction, it's just, that direction that's the way to the city centre. Again, we've not talked much about the city centre and the motorway mess. Maybe we will later, but I just want to say that you get out of that core of Leeds city centre and the mess it just compounds. And Sheepscar is one of the places where there is just a snarled up carnage of tarmac in all the. I mean, there's in amongst this lot is bus stops, is a college, is shops, the remains of what were perhaps shops as part of a community on the edges of this, with just snarled up roads in all. It's just horrible, absolutely horrible.
And so here is the map of Sheepscar in the middle of last century, and you can see there's industry, there's churches, there's all sorts of stuff going on here. You can sort of see the roads going this way, that way. You've got a feel. You've got kind of communities here. You could. I'm highlighting yellow. I've got my yellow pen on for some reason, which is obviously useless on this white. But you get a feel for Sheepscar. However, let's just flick back and forth here and just have a look at the scale of road construction here. The scale of demolition, the scale, yes, there's some industry here, but not all of it. Tramway Street, Evelyn Street, Matlock Terrace, Rownsley Street. Just flattened, gone, just wiped out at scale. And you go down down towards Stamford Street, Winton Street, just obliterated for the the scale, and you're getting a tease in the corner of the mess that was done to Leeds at the set. But that's another episode entirely. This is bad. This is really, really bad. It just feels like this was once a community. It was once that a focal point. What was it? Day nursery. It was like once a focal point for for a community, and gone, completely gone.
So we're in Chapel Allerton. It's pretty dense bit of northern Leeds, sort of suburbia you'd expect if you know this sort of side of the city. It's kind of fringes, varying levels of deprivation, and kind of quite a diverse bit of the city. Part of the reason I'm parked here in the middle of near the Aldi is because there's the bicycles. So we're talking about integrated transport. There are the LNER bicycles, as they're not called by anybody. Hire bikes, docked hire bikes. I don't know how successful that scheme has been, actually. God, it's a lovely day, I tell you. This is feels like a summer day, not a spring day I've had today. Filming this on Tuesday. Yeah, Chapel Allerton. It's a classic case of urban area and an enormous tractor carrying trees. Why? Why is that happening? Lots of radials, too much traffic, and the bus service, as good as it can be, is just not enough to deal with the fact that this is a through route to get out to the suburbs where the buses are not as good. It needs a much higher density of the ability to move people, and I have to say, as you look at some of the nice buildings completely empty, you start looking a bit closer at some of the businesses here, and you start realising that Britain this is where you see Britain not coping well with the 21st century, because actually there are businesses along here that I have come to before, and I've come to Chapel Allerton, that are now closed. In any case, through theme here is bigger cars, larger vehicles, too much traffic, and a lot of road noise. Not great.
Oh, that's quite funny. Here's me gonna do some editing on the fly because I've got distracted midway through doing something. And there we go, and there we are, and there we go. It's Chapel Allerton. It's Chapel Allerton with the city in the background. There we are, marvellous. We got there. There's Chapel Allerton. You can see the kind of the proximity to the city centre. You can sort of see Sheepscar actually in the sort of here area, I think probably. And yeah, you can sort of think this is like villages out of the city centre. A lot of northern Leeds looks like this. There's Chapelton was another part that there's a bike shop there that I go to, and a few other parts that's a kind of a pretty vibrant part of the city, but also very deprived and suffers from a lack of services, public services of all kinds. Not much more to say. I think I've said it all. Let's whiz forwards and see how many more of these that I've forgotten. Go on.
So I'm up at More Allerton now, and why have I come up here? Well, I've come here to talk about orbital stuff, because Leeds has an opportunity for, unlike quite a few cities, it has the opportunity to do quite a lot of good stuff orbitally, thanks to its stupid orbital roads that it has, of which here's one. Here's the big junction at More Allerton. You can see it says Ring Road on the sign there. You can see Ring Road on the sign there. Just huge wide road, completely unnecessary, full of traffic because it exists. A reminder to anyone watching this going, you can't get rid of the roads because where's that traffic? No. The traffic is there because the road exists. If you get rid of the road, you remove
normal
the traffic.
Service will be resumed.
It is essentially that
PowerPoint
simple.
is having a grum for some
particularly
unknown
you need
reason.
to do both car and stick, and you also
Stop
need
saying
to have
things,
good
me.
public transport. But this is ripe for a different solution. Having this big bloody ring road full of stupid traffic.
This is where I need the.
Gives an opportunity to do something different and something interesting. That way to Leeds, by the way.
PowerPoint.
And you can just see traffic pouring in there, traffic pouring in here. It's just about approaching rush hour now. There's an interesting point here because we are ostensibly in the presence of some actual cycle infrastructure because
I can't stop it. It's me. You can hear me talking.
It continues over there.
Maybe I should stop talking over myself.
Being used by a couple of people. I would not describe.
I think Okay, I've saved it. Thank goodness for that. Right, let's get rid of my face again. The normal service resumed. PowerPoint, don't autosave in the middle of a Lincoln episode.
There. Just huge wide road, completely unnecessary, full of traffic because it exists. So remind anyone watching this going, oh, you can't get rid of the roads because where's that traffic? No. The traffic is there because the road exists. If you get rid of the road, you remove the traffic. It is essentially that simple. Particularly, you need to do both carrot and stick, and you also need to have good public transport. But this is ripe for a different solution. You know, having this big bloody ring road full of stupid traffic gives an opportunity to do something different and something interesting. That way to Leeds, by the way, and you can just see traffic pouring in there, traffic pouring in here. It's just about approaching rush hour now. There's an interesting point here because we are ostensibly in the presence of some actual cycling infrastructure because there is a actual segregated cycleway. It continues over there and it is being used by a couple of people. I would not describe this as a pleasant way to commute, but it is a way to commute, you know, bicycles. But it's just look at this. You know, the infrastructure continues. Leeds has got a proliferation of, you know, you compare it to the embarrassment that is York with about 50 yards of nothing. Leeds has put a lot of money into decent segregated cycling infrastructure. It's not a complete and perfect network, but it is a broad improvement on what was there before. But I have to say, like, it's pretty hostile. Do you want your kids cycling, even though it is segregated infrastructure? The test is always, do you want your kids cycling on it? If the answer's no, then it's not quite up to snuff.
So, oh, yeah, that's right. That's the last one of these, don't worry. I'm sure I've fixed this better this time. Look, this is the trouble with having time, being limited on time and rushing oneself and maintaining a podcast and a day job and etc. Right, here we go. So there is... here you can see the roundabout where I was stood. There's where the roundabout where I was stood. The buses kind of going this way and that way, as well as buses going this way and that way. Leeds city centre up here, and just gives you a feel for this gives you a feel for the density of Leeds as a city. Like this is, don't be fooled by the compression here. These are large buildings. This is a large amount of population, and what you see in this image actually is pretty dense from a population perspective. Let's see. Let's keep going, shall we?
So we're up in Alwoodley, and the houses are large. They are very large. This is posh old place up here. The reason I'm up here though is because we're at the end of Leeds. That Leeds isn't over there. This is the road where it ends, and it's also funny because everyone's using it it's being used as a ring road. We're up at the end, and the reason I want to talk about this is because of what this part of Leeds looks like and how you serve this part of Leeds with mass transit, with a fixed transport system, and also because it's kind of fun to be right up at the edge and to see what it all looks like, and to line up all these little, kind of looking at the various parts of the corridor and understanding, actually this one, the Alwoodley corridor, is broadly pretty affluent, with those more deprived sections, the more diverse sections, closer to the centre of Leeds. But yeah, there isn't any Leeds that way.
So there's a few people saying that like the work in the city centre has closing roads, adding cycle lanes everywhere has made it a lot better. Absolutely, we need to do a bit of an exploration of the city centre to see where things have moved to. But the city is more than its beating heart. You know, York, it's absolutely true as well. Everyone goes on about how wonderful York is. It's like, no, just a very small section of the city centre is nominally pedestrianised, and everywhere else is awful. So here's Alwoodley. Here's Alwoodley, or bits of Alwoodley, this is well posh. The houses are enormous. There's like Dick Place levels of big house. You know, there's like, I'm pretty sure there's an Aston Martin park behind me. So quite the contrast, like Chapelton and other places down here. And there's more Allerton, Chapel Allerton. It's a sort of string, and you can see there's a kind of a corridor. How this gets serviced? Well, there's a few ways to service it, but there's a main road that runs through that's pretty wide and gives you space to do quite a lot of things. So there are options. Let's do some scoring. So Sheepscar, with its, you know, having hammered everyone out of the place, permeability is hopeless. It's just as bad as it could possibly be in any urban area. It does have pretty good radial connections in terms of frequency. I was umming and ahhing over a 3 or a 4 here. And by the way, for any of these, challenge these scores. If you don't agree with any of the scores that we go through, do challenge me on them. Next up, we have the orbital, which is very poor. National connectivity and transport integration, again, not great. And the violence, dreadful. Sheepscar has been obliterated by transport, so it scores very low. Chapel Allerton, better. It's in better shape. We're going to go, I need to move a bit faster, actually. So more Allerton, again, moving further from the city, lower frequency, scores a little bit worse again. And Alwoodley scores a little better only because of where it loses in connectivity, it gains in the lack of violence, in its escaping violence. Right now to Whinmoor. Only a couple of spots to kind of get a feel for this corridor, actually. We're going to Oakwood and then Whinmoor proper.
I've come down to Oakwood, or rather up to Oakwood, because it's very different in flavour to lots of other parts that I've picked out. I wanted to pick a range of different sort of levels of deprivation and levels of sort of age of constructions, sort of physical feel to the urban landscape. This is Oakwood. Kind of there's Oakwood, and there's this. It's quite nice. It's very pleasant. It's kind of an aspirational spot. There's lots of nice shops. Although I have to say, feels like it's got rougher rather than less rough over the last wee while. I used to come here quite a lot, and there's a really nice little cafe down there that I think there's now closed called Run. Anyway, it did flat whites, so the sort of place that you'd expect from me. In that direction is Roundhay Park, and over there is the lakeside little cafe, and there's all the huge, very, very busy park area that's super busy with families. This has frequent enough buses. It's on the Roundhay line, which I'm going to get a picture of in a minute, just to add to my collection of lines that we see as Leeds' sort of transport infrastructure, integrated system nominally. And the frequency is not bad. So, but again, this is the traffic, all the traffic. This is a route that should have more. So I kind of an emerging theme of this segment is the extent to which North Leeds being mostly ignored by the mass transit plan is because it's difficult, because there are people who are going to moan about it. There's less open space, which means you're going to have more people getting grumpy, more narrow roads being converted into an alternative way of getting people in and out of the city, and then therefore cars being displaced, and that's politically unpopular. Is there a better reason for it? Well, we'll see when we look at the final map showing all the different PROCIV scores and giving us a feel for, what's good, what's bad. I'm going to spoiler alert. It's all pretty bad. Leeds is in a bad way when it comes to transport. It does not. There are no good PROCIV scores on here.
Microsoft is just absolutely intent to destroy this episode. Go away. I don't care about the fact that Windows 10 is no longer supported. It's not important to me. Anyway, there's Oakwood, the view into the city, and again, you can see this quite narrow weaving corridor that makes its way in. But again, you get these pictures are nice because they give you a bit of a feel for the texture of the place. This is very leafy. It's very nice. It's very affluent, and this does make me think. One of the reasons, I guess, why North Leeds it fell down the list of priorities is because if you add if you've got your modelling and you're adding mass transit, I don't really like the phrase mass transit, but anyway, if you're adding mass transit, so tram lines up into the north of Leeds, then from a deprivation index perspective, you're potentially just shifting more reasonably affluent people around, rather than connecting up areas that are much less affluent on the other corridors. So I'm guessing that's why the prioritisation has gone the way it is. Anyway, let's go somewhere else.
So I'm up at Whinmoor, at the edge of Leeds on the ALL, the Eastern Leeds Orbital route, possibly. You might be saying, well, this doesn't need to be served by mass transit. Well, it's yet another example of an orbital route in Leeds that is built for road vehicles. It's cars again. This is 225 million quid's worth of infrastructure in today's money. 225 million quid for yet more bypass. I thought we'd learned better than this. What are we doing? What are we doing? Anyway, what's interesting about this spot is there's a lot of new housing that's been popping up of the sort of varying ages along here. So, the advantage of new bypasses is that they can themselves get subsumed into the urban core. As is funny about the sun setting. Have fun with that, continuity people, whenever this sits within the overall day of fun I've been having in and around Leeds. There's some cycling infrastructure that was built with it that you can see behind me here. That's, very nice. There it is. It's a bit, you can see it a bit easier here. All fine and good, but the main point here is this is a massive barrier to people moving in and out of the city, and yet more generated traffic. Because that's what happens when you build roads like this. You generate more traffic. What are we doing here? Oh, anyway, let's have a look at the map in a minute.
So there we are, Whinmoor, and you can see into the city. Whinmoor kind of has a lot of awfully designed urban environment. It's got some industrial stuff that's, again, in cities is never designed nicely. And then it's got all this aspirational, look, we needed a bypass for question mark reasons. Hopeless. And so the scores. Oakwood scores reasonably okay, like spoiler alert, nowhere in Leeds scores well, but it's kind of got some level of consistency. Whinmoor drops down because of its lack of connectivity, and the permeability is really poor. The urban permeability is really poor. Right, let's go to East Leeds. Let's head out. Let's head out towards Kippax, shall we? Out towards the dark fringes of Eastern Leeds. Oh, and we start. Oh, why have I done this way around? I'm sure there's a logic to it. We start with. Wait a minute. Let me. Why are we starting this way? God, this episode it's complicated, isn't it? This is Crossgates. Let's see what I'm saying about Crossgates.
So I'm in Crossgates, and in that direction is Central Leeds. Behind me is Model Shop Leeds over there. Shout out to Model Shop Leeds. And over here is a bus stop. And look, where I'm stood now is kind of interesting. I'm like halfway between the railway, the Crossgates station is that direction, and the York Road, which would have had a tram line on it, is in that direction, in the Leeds Supertram sort of era of designs. But what I wanted to do is talk about the bus stops, because throughout this whole series, we've gone through we're at number 11 now. We're halfway through, actually, basically halfway through at this point. Throughout, we've had the bus infrastructure, and it's clear that they have, in some instances, been a decent amount of investment in improving bus infrastructure, not least with counters that you can hopefully see back there, giving an idea of the number of buses in. So, 8, 15, 24 minutes, not bad frequency of buses. If I go outside and show you, you can see some of the branding that you'll have seen a bit of it already. But you can see some of the branding there. They've got these lines that they're calling. So this one's the East Leeds line, tied in with the mass transit plan, which is absolutely the right thing to do. You create the identity of the corridor independent of what mode it is, nodes before modes, and that's what's going on here with a coloured identity. It's got the metro, the West Yorkshire Metro branding. I suspect that'll, Weaver line, Weaver network sort of branding. Maybe it'll start seeping through, but that should be a gentle transition. The Metro identity was always rubbish because it was just, what do you mean Metro? It's just, so creating an actual core identity. London has the Roundel. Let's see if the Weaver network kind of embeds. But you see here, as the sun setting behind me, continuity people have fun. The competition out there for if those of you can get the right order of when I filmed all of these, because they're all out of sequence from my perspective, but not for you. Anyway, chronologically irrelevant. Bus stops. So that clearly there is a semblance of a network and ostensibly a 15-minute or better frequency network that has been established already. There is cross-ticketing. The extent to which that always works is mixed. Like park and ride ticketing is not necessarily compatible with others. First have still got a load of their own purple First branded stuff. A bit like happened in York, where it was like York's identity, and then First Group did their own rebrand and took that as an opportunity to just get rid of all the York branding and go back to First Group branding again. Screw you guys. So yeah, there is still very much not a strong identity in the buses and what people see are the bus routes. I'd say that consistency, and also having buses that are the colour of the routes would be quite nice, but with the identity on it, you could maybe do that on the railways, multiple coloured trains with a strong single identity. How might you achieve that? Anyway, I digress. So the reason I'm on this big bloody avenue is because there's loads of big bloody avenues on this side of Leeds. It's just how they built this stuff in the interwar years. And in the post-Second World War years, but I would suspect this is interwar, actually. But in any case, it's mid-20th century. Lots of these big avenues, as is the case in lots of cities around the UK. You have these kind of big, broad avenues that are perfect for doing something different. And you can see, indeed, here, just as you saw on Kirkstall Road right back at the start, you have some nominal bus infrastructure. In fact, there is a bus lane there, fixed infrastructure, which is good. But again, it often just peters out uselessly, which kind of undoes the value of it. The other reason I'm talking about these big avenues is because they're kind of, yes, you've got a nice big wide pavement. Again, you could have mixed cycling infrastructure here. But it's if you live here, it's a long way to walk along a really busy, horrible, fast road to get to the railway station. Okay, you've got the bus stop there, so you're probably more likely to use the bus than you are to use the train. But again, it's the quality of, some of these decisions, the ergonomics of using the public transport system, when you've actually just got a big, wide, straight road that people yobbo down, not least the guy who just did a wheelie on an electric motorbike a minute ago. The ergonomics of public transport are really important. Go back to the permanence episode with Dr. Kevin Tennant and I. We talked about some of the stuff that makes it important. It's not just having the systems, everything else together that makes it work.
Right, now I don't know why I've done these out of order. You're getting the picture. Anyway, it's a little view as to what's going to be next. You know what? I'm going to just whiz in and understand why. Here's a hint as to what we're looking at next, to give you a bit of orienteering, and hopefully I'll fix this by the time we get to the next segment. So there, let's see what's happening next.
As a lovely Trans-Pennine Express service goes off in that direction, through what will be Thorpe Park Station. I'm going to go down and film the railway in a minute, so you get a closer look at that. Why am I up here? Well, for this lot, what I'm going to call Barrington, even though that's not what it's called. But there's a whole bunch, little cluster, probably about, 750 homes down here. Over here is a TK Maxx and a whole bunch of cars parked because it's Thorpe Park, completely served by cars. You've embedded the behaviour because all of this is road infrastructure. So that it doesn't matter that you're building a railway station, everyone comes here by car now. Anyway, behind me, this is the ELOR, the East Leeds orbital route. Thorpe Park, which has been building up over decades really, but it's a fairly new commercial and now retail estate. This is the newish retail bit with the high rents. Property being built over here, which looks quite nice. It's got some nice greens surrounding, but also, actually what's surrounding it is this. It's this. Well, okay, a fence, but it's sort of a metaphorical fence of just roads.
Why is it? It might just be because it's 8 gigabytes of PowerPoint presentation.
Not hugely impressive. The other thing,
making James's job very difficult.
We should talk about then is, I'll talk about orbital railways. I have done and will do, I'm sure. You can see some of the 225 million quid's worth being spent on these nice, repeatable.
Last thing I want to do is it to murder itself
in the background. So I'm down here. There's the nice.
James, I'm sure you can stitch the fix, or I could just do a pre-recorded bit for you. Sorry, everyone. I've never noticed this being a problem before, but I guess it's because the file is large and I've got lots of things open.
Over here will be the railway station. Bus connections. There's no clear and obvious, neat bus connection in. There's the bridge I was stood on earlier, which doesn't look too close to the civil engineering.
Unbelievable. Right, I'm going to, right now, stop that from happening. Sorry, everyone. Save. Do not autosave. So, autosave file stored? No, it's switched off. It's done. There we go. Now let's see if I can recover this without it breaking. Let's go half face and...
Actually, what's surrounding it is this. It's this. Well, okay, a fence, but it's sort of a metaphorical fence of just roads. Good grief. So, not hugely impressive. The other thing that we should talk about then is, I'll talk about orbital railways. I have done and will do, I'm sure. You can see some of the 225 million quid's worth being spent on these nice, repeatable core 10 steel bridges over there that I've in the background. So I'm down here. There's the nice attenuation pond. The quality of properties here, these look like they're okay quality-wise. These properties look like they're, reasonable nick. Over here will be the railway station. Bus connections. There's no clear and obvious, neat bus connection in. There's the bridge I was stood on earlier, which doesn't look too close to the civil engineering. British civil engineering quality, second to none. We're going to walk this way and show you where the access down to the railway station will be, and then perhaps get up on the bridge to have a look down and across to understand what's going on that front. You can see, in fact, behind me here, this is the path. There is the path, which is what will give access down to the railway station when it does open, which is going to be in a couple of years' time. Possibly 1 year. These things always slip, even though, you know, if we were building more railway stations, perhaps we'd be better at opening them more quickly. I'm going to walk around because looking down onto the railway and showing where that station will be will offer some insights. So I've shown you, I'll have brought up where the station is, and I'll talk briefly about it, but I thought I'd very briefly look behind, because you can see one of the replacement bridges going in, you know, a bridge lift, but because of listings they've had to put this kind of faux cast structure inside it. It's quite nice. Oh, there's a train going through, lovely. Also you can see the electrification going up. It's nice. Like, trouble is, it's not a suburban railway. It's running and doing everything all at once, and well, I don't need to repeat how much of a problem that is for railway operations. You've all heard me say it 1,000 times. Over that side is where the station is going to be, just drop down there. And the interesting feature of that station is going to be built with extra wide platforms, with the intention that the Northern Highlands Rail 4 tracking will happen. Let's see if that ever does, but the station will have very oddly wide platforms.
Yeah, I'd go on and on about that, but here we are. So now we jump out to Kippax. Let's see what we're going to say about Kippax. I'm going to get some hoof on. It's going to be a longer episode tonight. Not super long, but a longer episode.
This thing here. But also the guy on a moped. I'm not in Garforth, which is the place at the end of the kind of the mass transit corridor as marked out in the consultation. Oh God, there's more of the things. Look, there's a whole cluster of them. Odd. Anyway, I've not gone to Garforth. I'm at Kippax. I'm in Kippax village, a place that shares lots of similar historical sort of features. You know, mining village isn't anymore, has become a big commuter town, or not big commuter town, but an expanding commuter town. But it has lots of challenges. Kippax, being off the railway line, was on a railway line, is not anymore, has lots of, well, wandering around Kippax, you get a feeling for the challenges that PROCIV really exposes on each of the 6 sort of measures. We'll go through those now.
Also, look, these things, I don't get them. Why they're there? They're everywhere around the co-ops in Leeds. No idea why. Very strange. Right, PROCIV scores. Crossgates, 14. Thorpe Park a bit better, partly for the fact that Thorpe Park, that whole area is being built, or at least that residential area is being built with really nice permeability internally, albeit not to anywhere else. But it also doesn't have a high violence score, or it has a high violence score because it hasn't really had anything inflicted on it because it's brand new. Kippax, very full marks on the old violence score, but it just doesn't have good public transport, so it really suffers on that front. Next, Wakefield and Five Towns. This corridor. Let's have
quite fun seeing container traffic working its way back and forth here, because I worked on the gauge clearance to allow these to, particularly the W12 ones. You can see the train in that direction. That's the direction to Leeds, by the way. I'm in Hunslet. This is actually HS2 would have come through near here, ish, as planned. I always like seeing a freight train going around, but actually this big valley of railway, well, let's walk this way, because Hunslet Car, the particular community that we're about to walk through, is fortressed on either side by transport violence, and I would say the railway is part of that story. You know, absolutely trapping in a part. I mean, it's a mixture. You have parts of the community here that were, in a way, the railway was here first, the community is built up around it, but the railway continues to inflict violence on the area surrounding it. There's some work, so I'm crossing the road and not going to get carried. There's an airplane above my head. In many ways, we're quite close to the city centre here in Hunslet, and also, of course, famous for various bits of railway history, manufacturing of rail vehicles. The Middleton Railway is a short way that way. Again, as I'll mention in the spoiler alert little bonus clip at the end, that you need to stay tuned for. Leeds is a bit of a cradle of railway development that kind of often gets forgotten. There's a painful irony in that what Leeds now has as a railway system overall. Anyway, why am I walking over here? Well, I'm walking over here because I want to demonstrate in a short walk through what feels... the other thing I want to talk about is talk about permeability throughout. So far we've talked about it a lot. What are we on now? We're on number 14, I think. A mixture of new infill suburbia with older buildings that also very strange facade. That was a little fascinating little architectural tidbit. What can I hear? Hark my ears. Is this sort of permeability point in that this wide sweeping road that cuts through this suburban area. So you combine the lack of permeability of what is really inner suburbia with the fact that it is inner suburbia. It's this soft, low density or medium density housing that is just not an efficient use of space. Where you have a railway station, well, there isn't one near here, by the way, but where you do have focuses of public transport, you need to increase density. Oh yeah, sure enough, as I round the corner, again, look, this road here in a town, and it's got a deflection curb because people go too fast around this corner. It's just, why? That should be a 90-degree bend. It doesn't need to be. Oh, it's just, to an extent, there's industry. There's quite a lot of industry goes that Pontifex. There's quite a lot of industry over there, and I suppose this is a feeder road for it. But when I talk about violence, before I talk about violence, let's talk about low-density bungalows in the middle of a city. What? No, when I talk about violence, oh look, it's Denton all over again, because here is the M621, absolutely grim, cutting a swathe through Leeds in both directions. And just look at the concrete supports, the houses sat on the edge of it, absolutely grim. And you can see from that, what is not a very long walk there, that was like not even 4 minutes, that we have trapped this community with a railway on one side and the motorway on the other. What's quite nice though is that railway has substantially more capacity than this motorway does. Are we exploiting that capacity though? We're not. And I'll tell you which one is quieter and more pleasant. Over there was a goods train carrying probably 40, 50 lorries worth of goods. There's one that just went under, louder than that train was. Yeah. Violence.
There's a reason I've included this aerial with this bit, because there's you can see down the bottom here is a gigantic parking ride. I think it's Hunslet parking ride, which is great. But again, it's an emerging theme of like, bring your cars here, not it's just look, yeah. I'll talk about this later.
Behind me is central Leeds. The canal gets you from here, Woodlesford, into the centre of the city in pretty good time on a bicycle. That and a few other things contributes to Woodlesford probably scoring the best of every single location we look at in today's episode.
Woodlesford, yeah, it's nice. Some bits of it nicer than others, but like, there's where I was wandering around the canal, and you've got basically a through route all the way into Leeds on your bicycle if you want it, as well as like a railway station with mixed frequency, admittedly, and the bus services are not too bad as well. So yeah, Woodlesford, pretty good.
Outwood, what can we say about Outwood? Well, we'll go through the PROCIV score in a minute, but you can see that this is an installed platform, cheapo Woodo platform from the days when passenger transport executives could do things like build railway stations, and indeed lots of them were built around West Yorkshire. It's a chance. Outwood's a funny chance, well, twofold. Firstly, I mentioned Outwood, specifically cite Outwood as an example when I was in front of the Transport Select Committee. Maybe I'll insert that bit of footage now. Outwood in West Yorkshire, similar story, population of 7,600, 568 passengers per hour per direction, 2 trains an hour. Interesting, there you go. Gives you context of the problem with running a suburban railway and a long distance railway on the same infrastructure. The thing about Outwood that's also interesting is it gives us an example of when the passenger transport executive did build a whole bunch of suburban railway connectivity, but tried to do so smooshing that on top of a regional and long distance railway. So yeah, also it is funny that this is the high speed line to London from Leeds, and it's not folks. Anyway, Outwood, where does it sit? So Outwood is on the way down. It's into it's the 5 cities, 5 towns bit, working its way out towards Wakefield, and mixed bag. Let's in fact, let's let a train go past, and then we can do some scoring. What are we about to see go past? We're about to see a nice electric train go past. There's this lovely Class 333 whiz past. Look at this. There. Marvellous. There it is. Nice. It's a train. Right. So, while that train whizzes along next to us, what's the PROCIV score for Outwood? Let's have a look.
Well, there's Outwood. Here's Outwood. You can see the station. It's over here, and the massive car park, and again you can see the proximity in towards Leeds, and you sort of see the scale of the development. Hunslet. Let's start with Hunslet. Hunslet's score is not good, as you'd imagine. Violence low. It only gains from the fact that it has decent radial connections. Woodlesford is the opposite end of the spectrum in that its radial connections are not much better, but it has pretty good orbital connections and better permeability, and crucially, a violence score at the opposite end of the spectrum. Outwood, better on the violence spectrum, but it loses a bit in its connectivity, hence why and also its permeability. The design of the urban landscape is lower, so it loses a bit on the score, dropping from 18 to 14. So Woodlesford, our highest scorer so far, and indeed it is the highest score of the whole lot. Right, South Leeds, Dewsbury. Let's have
find ourselves in Holbeck. Holbeck, pockets of residences, in some cases quite nice, in other cases sort of housing stock that's just been abandoned and left, and really deserves a lot more love from the council and from the various housing associations involved. But and there's some nice green space. But on the other side you have the bloody motorway, because the M621 barrels its way through here, causing untold misery. If we want to know what violence looks like, once again, we have a motorway slamming through. The other thing, though, is there are pockets of good permeability. You know, there is here a dedicated, it's a nice dedicated high-quality cycle lane next to the motorway, and the motorway provides an enormous block to back and forth. If this is the condition of the sort of permeability across the motorway, not many of these ways to get through. Admittedly, traffic-free, but it's. Look, Holbeck, of all the parts of Leeds that are kind of close to the centre of Leeds, we can see the Candlestick, we can see the Windy building. They're all over there. You can see them over there. You can't see them with the camera, but I can see them over there. You can see the Candlestick, the Windy building, the station's over there, and yet very walking distance of the city centre, and it's not going to score well. And in fact, there's a reason why Holbeck scores the weakest of everywhere that we will be going to today. It really suffers for the damage caused by the motorway, and let's just go through the Google Earth and show you what that actually materially looks like, as well as the decisions about where industry should be and where industry was, and the choices of, rather than redeveloping and prioritising an inner city core that has decent density of residences, so people are close to those services, what we're going to do is keep them as cheap, low quality industrial buildings, and not bother to sort of have a think about strategically what the city should actually be. We're going to just kind of leave those areas to decay. And the result is what you see across most of Holbeck.
And here's a shot of the Google Earth, just to give you an idea of just how. Just look at this. Look. And the railway, I'm afraid, also part of that inflicting of violence as well. This is just. It's horrible. And then 50, whatever it is, goes off. 58 goes off in that direction as well. It's just absolutely just grim. Really, really, really grim.
There's the White Rose railway station not being built. It's had its own problems. I'm in Cherwell. The reason I'm in Cherwell is because, well, I'll get into the reasons when I show you the map in a minute, but I want to point out that the entrance to the station on this side is not very substantial, despite the fact that Cherwell is here. It's just an interesting observation. The Cottingley station's a little bit further that way, but again, the main core of Cherwell is kind of in this direction. And anyway, we'll maybe pick into that just in a minute.
So there's Cherwell. There is here's the urban core. There's the as yet still not finished White Rose Station, and you can see the general vibes into towards the city centre. We're getting further away. The story's looking different. Let's see where else we get to. Oh, a nice little rebuilt station we're about to hop to. Oh, first of all though, look, it's a bus. Look, I'll just show you buses exist. Look, buses are fine. The screens don't work with camera refresh rates. They are real and reasonably frequent. These buses are running past me pretty regularly. It was nice.
So Morley, there's the new Morley station, which is going to have to be demolished for the current Northern Paris rail plans. Whoops. Down here is the old Morley station, which is on a transition, or was on a horrible transition. So by getting rid of it, you could ease the curve, get higher speeds through. You can also see, actually, you can't see the electrification because they haven't put it in through here yet. But the further back, going that way, you get to white thingy, the unfinished station, and you can see all the oily masses are up down there. So they're going to be coming through here to do the electrification here soon, I would hope. What's interesting is that this is basically a national station because it has connections. It shouldn't, by the way, but it does currently have connections right through, Leeds, Manchester, pretty frequently. Offers pretty decent connectivity backwards and forwards, but how does that fit within the broader picture?
Well, here you can see there's Morley sort of behind and the station's down here. I say it should have connection through to Leeds and Manchester, but it should have high frequency electrified suburban only. That's what the existing Transpennine route should become. Interestingly, there's White Rose Station there, giving you an idea of like proximity. Then Cottingley is not much further. This is the distance between stations there should be in more of Leeds on the railway, by the way. So let's do some scoring. Holbeck, the worst score, I think, of all of them because of the level of violence combined with the lack of... It doesn't have good connectivity in the same way that other parts of the inner city do. So it only scores 8. Cherwell, better. Surrounded on all sides by transport infrastructure, though. The motorway is on the other side of the hill as well. Morley is doing much better. It's understandably, and the ridership of that station is high. It's pretty good, and it's escaped most transport violence, really. So then let's finish up with our route between Leeds and Bradford. Let's have a little look.
I love pockets of urban history, and this is really one of them. Oh, there's a nice 3-car 158 disappears over the top of the... talking of which, look, we're in New Wortley. The pocket of history is this little remain of terrace and building here with a business in it that actually all was pulled down in slum clearances and replaced by tower blocks, which, thanks to a lack of love, themselves became slums. They've had a lot more love now, and the quality of living in these is not necessarily as bad as it used to be, but also see all discussions about leasehold, about bad landlords, and so on and so on. Also that nice like cobblestones and some of the original streets that were here to give an idea of how much these were sort of little just snapshots of time here. New Wortley is a little corner surrounded on all sides by that guy on the scooter guy is chasing me all over the place. New Wortley, surrounded on almost all sides by large roads, the Armley gyratory. There's a prison, actually. We talk about infrastructure. But one of the key things that's interesting about this area is actually, if I'm going to walk over here, is the thing about the way that these areas are built. So you have the tower blocks, and then you've got lower, kind of medium density housing. The thing about this area is, yes, it has the violence, which wrecks the PROCIV score, but, and it's worth saying, there's even a little sign here. These areas are remarkably permeable. Like, they get a really good permeability score because you have these sort of nice paths that connect up lots of things that make walking a much easier and nicer experience than driving in these sort of little areas. And actually, I don't mind a tower block, but I quite like these medium density little buildings. I think they're quite nice. It's quite smart. I hope that they're well looked after inside by the Housing Authority, by Leeds. But look, the reality is that, yes, tower blocks, not everyone's a fan of tower blocks, including the people who have to put up with living inside them quite often. But these have the potential to be really nice areas if these were better looked after buildings, and the area had more invested in making it wasn't surrounded on all sides by massive roads, and perhaps had better public transport accessibility. This area would be quite something. As it happens, it doesn't do quite so well on the old scoring system. Anyway, let's have a look.
So yeah, New Wortley. I was wandering around, around here, and yeah, it's just interesting. It's a snapshot of the sort of development that we saw a lot in British cities, and you can see some of that permeability in action here. Look, you can see that's non-cars, it's people access, and it's in grid so that it actually follows natural desire lines.
So I'm in Bramley, and something different because they have kind of the nominal bus, Bramley Centre bus station-y type thing. I look forward to all these first buses no longer being first buses. It's not going to happen. It cannot happen too soon. And again, you see you've got the metro branding, not a metro. You have just this object. Some brutalism is good, some is not. It's interesting. Bramley, I mean, it's a classic of the type. You've got lots of old buildings, and then you've got a huge swathe of new residential, and I say new, I mean post, sort of 70s, 80s sort of era stuff. It's what you expect, but how does it match up? Actually, one of the things that's worth saying is that one of the things that Bramley really benefits from, to the point of really pushing the numbers, is on its radial connections into Leeds.
So also there's some good cycling connections from Bramley. A bit of discussion about Morley. The current plans, and I haven't seen any alterations to them. The current plans are that the end of the tunnel will be broken out to create a junction to create 4-track, and then you'll have to rebuild the station around a 4-track footprint, not a 2-track footprint. So it'll be a 2-track tunnel opening out into 4-track there. That's as to my knowledge, the current plan. Anyway, right. Where are we next? Yes, we come to the end of this bit. You'll be glad to know. We'll round off. It's going to be an hour-and-a-half episode, isn't it? Crikey. The bonus will follow shortly afterwards. Anyway, I digress. Note this area of cleared scrub that could be doing something useful, but isn't currently, because anyone who knows this junction will know that this is currently, they're doing a Hodigan on it, I believe. They're putting like a stupid bit of extra road here, or maybe they're doing that with it. I don't know. Whatever they're doing with it, I hate it.
And so we come at last to Pudsey, the last place on our list on this circuitous dance around the entirety of Leeds. I'm in New Pudsey Station, or rather the car park next to it, and I want to talk about, Pudsey. Well, New Pudsey, firstly, is not at Pudsey. It's quite a distance out from Pudsey itself. This station is a fairly recent addition. I hear a train. Oh yeah, there we are. Another 158 coming in behind. Anyway, the thing I want to talk about is the approach. Look at this. Cars. This is what I describe as not a description, sorry. This is what I would say is a perfect explanation of the failure of, and another one. Oh, another 158 going the other direction. There we are. Anyway. All these cars represent the massive failure of joined up transport, of integrated transport in West Yorkshire, in Leeds. These are described as, it's a policy success. Look at all the people who are here by cars. Like, all the cars parked here is like a train, 2 trains. This is not a success. This is a massive failure. The ability to move people around the city. It is hopeless. Let's go down to the station, shall we? Let's see what we can see. So, the good thing that Pudsey has here, or rather anyone using New Pudsey Station has, is that the service frequency is pretty decent on the Leeds to Bradford line already. This is a line that's due for claiming that it's going to benefit from bye-bye train, benefit from those new Northern Powers rail upgrades. It's like no, just electrify. Just the line should have been electrified ages ago. Don't make a thing of it. It just should have happened a long time ago. New Pudsey, one of these newish stations that was put in. This one in the latter years of, even more recently actually. I think it's a fairly recent, relatively speaking, fairly recent station. Trains of the Rain. There. I might try and remember to get some B-roll of that. Anyway, New Pudsey. There's a few depressing things I want to talk about. An enormous amount of work going on over there. God knows how many millions being spent on a new massive rebuilt junction on the ring road. yeah, the money that's spent there, just think what it could do for the station. It should electrify half of the route between Leeds and Bradford. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go at the map. We've reached the end of our circuitous adventure. Let's go at the map and see how this leg of this corridor scores on the PROCIV system.
So, New Wortley, not great, 12, but its permeability saves it a little bit there. Bramley has good radial connections, helped by the additional cycling infrastructure, actually, so it gets a score of 16, which is not bad at all. Pudsey, lower, partly from the urban fabric as well, and also partly because it suffers a bit for the location of Pudsey versus the public transport offering is, the getting down to New Pudsey is not as clean, it doesn't work as well. So let's look at the whole picture, shall we? Very briefly. So we've got our scores that we can look at. We've got, we're going to go through the scores in a minute, but the bonus tonight will be, we'll dig into these PROCIV scores. So it's a chance to just breathe. This has been an intense episode. Raphael, you've said, what the hell is this? Yes, you're right. This is an intense episode. It's squeezed into an hour and a half. James is screaming, yelling at me for doing an hour and a half episode, but I wanted to do this in a one or not as two. In hindsight, should have done it as 2 episodes. Anyway, dig into Leeds PROCIV scores. That's the bonus. Let's get the scores up, shall we? So, one by one. Okay, fine. We're doing it one by one. So we've got, let's just keep going, shall we? So you can see, actually, as we work our way around and all the locations we've been, there are a couple of points of light, there are a couple of dark areas, but the reality is that, bearing in mind the maximum score you can get is 30, only a couple of places have gone above halfway. Bramley and Woodlesford, everywhere, and Morley, everywhere else is nadir so great. So you go through these and you see there are very few. There are some common themes as you go through these. The first of these, in terms of, I should say, how do you fix these scores? And I'm going to go in order of ease of fixing these scores. A thing that you could do to all of these that would rapidly increase the scores across the board is to integrate transport better. So the map, buses, trams eventually, and trains. You have to do all these things, remember. Visibility, simplicity, integration across modes, affordability, safety, ownership is how you get integrated transport. They've got these nice bus maps everywhere that sort of show these sort of routes, these corridors, but they don't show the railways, so it's just bus. And it's like, you need to integrate the trains. There are plenty of services that are basically West Yorkshire only that should be branded as West Yorkshire and should be branded as Weaver Network and integrated into the operation of the wider system. That's absolutely critical. So you've got all these nice lines, sort of market, kind of brandings, which I think are nice. Occasionally you get these really nice sort of digital displays with the branding as well, which is really smart. I like that. It's why the score across the board is not very poor. It's poor because there's so much more to integration than just doing this stuff. This is great, but it's a first step. The railway stations still have the stupid metro branding. They need to have, I look forward to the Weaver Network branding being rolled out across, but all these stations need to have that branding. They should have no rail alphabet anywhere near them. They should be using Fruitager or whatever the official typeface is of the Weaver Network. It should be integrated into the identity of the West Yorkshire transport system. Also the Northern pay-as-you-go thing, which makes it more like tap and go, which adds complexity. I would say those of you who use this regularly will understand it. I do not, because I don't use it regularly. For me, it's like, well, is this Northern? Is this Northern are doing some great stuff, and I want to get Alex Hornby on to talk about their mode share drive. But again, this, in terms of an urban versus a Northern, versus the West Yorkshire, it's messy. And there are occasional, I saw the Virgin bikes as well, not Virgin, the LNER bikes. There are occasional bits of cycling infrastructure integrated with stations. But bus stations and railway stations, no better example of this than the long 10+ minute walk from the bus station in the centre of Leeds to the railway station. Not integrated. The next thing that you would get your scores up that would admittedly require quite a bit of additional infrastructure is better orbitals. And yes, build, but also potentially just run orbital buses to get those scores up. Like, that's definitely something that could be improved, is getting orbital buses running around Leeds. That would really help improve the PROCIV scores and kind of across the board, reasonably straightforwardly, potentially with the long-term fixed infrastructure, but buses in the medium term. Of course, across the board, having really poor regional and national interconnect kind of connectivity scores is build HS2 as planned, or rather not as planned. Build it as we've said in episode 222. Could go back to that. That would massively jump up the scores. And then Trans-Pennine route upgrade is great, but it's only bringing the railway up to the level it needs to be to nominally provide additional regional long distance and suburban services. It's like bringing things up to where they needed to be 20, 30 years ago, not fit for the future. And I'm afraid capacity is going to be instantly used up because the demand is going to be filled immediately. It's just going to be like West Coast route modernisation again. Northern Bypass Rail is still a twinkle in nobody's eye. And then, of course, lastly, speed this up. Whether there's prioritisation or you do whatever happens, but it needs to be it needs to be sped up, not slowed down. DFT and HMT get out the way, right?
Fundamentally, Leeds is a massive city. It's an enormous city. It's a city built on mining, on industry, on finance, on exploitation of workers domestically and abroad. But ultimately, the urban core is surrounded by a huge hinterland, and a large hinterland requires one thing above all else, and that is a way to get into the core and to everywhere else. Leeds is probably the main example, the most egregious example of a city in the UK where that is just not achieved to the level it needs to be. More than any of more than Manchester, more than Birmingham, Leeds is a city that shows how not to do things. I'm stood here with the city behind me, but also with the motorway behind me as well, because Leeds is sliced up, entered left and carved in its core by motorways. And well, you can see from a violence perspective what that does to people's ability to move around. I think it's really a neat way for us to end the episode, to sort of say Leeds is a city of enormous potential. Indeed, it's fulfilling that potential despite, rather than because of, the mobility in and out of the city core. Why are people in Leeds worth so much less than people in cities, particularly like London? Why? Why is that the case? Leeds needs more. It needs more transport investment. It needs an actual coherent network that's more than just lines on a map, that is an actual material railway network. Something I'm sure we'll look at in future when we look at how you deliver a full-scale metro for Leeds. Look out for that in a future episode.
Very, very briefly, get subscribing. Tell all your mates to subscribe. Sometimes we do long-form content, mostly it's to an hour. And yes, I've been having clips of past content, so that also makes it more accessible. We've gone from 15,953 now to 16,174. We're getting there. So tell everyone. Get your mums, your dads, your grannies, your granddads, your infant children who shouldn't be on the internet. Get everyone to subscribe. We're hitting 25,000 before the end of the year. Let's do it, people. Let's do it.
With the sound of the motorway behind me and the centre of Leeds in the background, it only really remains for me to say thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio! A little bonus tidbit. This is the Lake Lock Railroad. Look, they've unresurfaced the road. Go to Street View. It was smashed to bits. They resurfaced it. They've unsurfaced it. They've now resurfaced it again, but with a nice little sort of bit going. The railroad was here. The railroad was here. You can walk along it. In fact, why don't we do that? Because this little bonus, I want to try for tonight's episode. We've talked about the manner in which we can connect use mass transit, if you like, to connect up Leeds. And I want to remind everyone that Leeds is one of the kind of cradles of railway technology as it moved into kind of the nascent modern railway. So there's kind of pre-modern railways that were popping up. Leeds was the home of quite a few of them, the Middleton, the Lake Lock Railroad, and a few others. Isn't it painfully ironic then that Leeds not only struggles to get railways working through the form of trams, and to be able to expand what is quite a good suburban network in the northwest of the city, but also that it still doesn't have a proper intercity connection to the rest of the country, a point that people don't really think about very often, just because the trains are fast, when actually there's a sizable chunk of railway that is hopelessly slow. Anyway, we talked about that earlier, didn't we? So how do I close out? Well, I think walking along this extremely ancient bit of railway is an opportunity to sort of think, what are we doing wrong here, folks? What are we doing wrong? Anyway, this is probably going to go after the credits as a little sort of chin scratch. Anyway, bye-bye those of you who stayed through the credits. This is your little bonus. You can enjoy some birdsong. And, oh yeah, happy 300.